Okay, we're going to continue the history of radio on slide 7, where we get into another person who also was in the movie, a very important fellow, Lee DeForest. In 1907, Lee DeForest created an invention called the Audion vacuum tube that permitted reliable voice transmissions for both point-to-point communication and broadcasting. This is what that vacuum tube looked like. He created it. It did something, but he was not exactly sure how it worked, and he was not exactly sure how it would be used. The next slide, we have another fellow who was featured in the movie, a man by the name of Edwin Armstrong. His tale is a sad one. In 1934, Edwin Armstrong invented FM radio. I don't even know if you guys know that there is FM and AM. Because, in the days when I was growing up, you got into your car, you turned on the radio, and if you wanted to listen to music, it was AM. That was the teenagers' haven for their music. And if you wanted to listen to talk or symphonic music, you would listen to FM. Today, those two things are turned around, and we'll find out why. But Armstrong invented FM radio. He completed his first field test sending an organ recital via both AM and FM from an RCA tower on top of the Empire State Building to the home of a friend on Long Island. The FM organ came through loud and clear, while the AM signal had much more static. This was also the case back in my teenage days. You got a lot of static with AM, and you thought, gosh, why can't our great music be on FM? That was what we always wanted. If you then click on slide 9, you get into another person who was featured in that movie that you saw, that history of radio. Armstrong and David Sarnoff. David Sarnoff, another main character, not only in radio, but later you'll see in television. Head of RCA, they were friends at first. But FM radio threatened to destroy the RCA empire built on mass sales of AM radios. He had already kicked in with AM. As far as Sarnoff was concerned, I based everything on AM. I've invested all my money in AM. We're staying with AM, even though FM is better. This brings to mind some of the competitions between Sony and the other IBM compatible versions of, not IBM compatible, but Sony versus non-Sony, let's just put it that way. Sony was its own proprietary system, and all the other systems, whether it be radio or television, and then you get in later when we talk about computers, we have competitions between Apple, which was also proprietary or is proprietary, and PCs, the Apple PC competition. Anyway, Sarnoff was a very clever fellow, as you see. He rose from very modest means to being one of the wealthiest men in the United States. Once Sarnoff realized the magnitude of Armstrong's invention, he blocked Armstrong by ordering RCA engineers to ask for more tests, lobbying federal regulators to deny Armstrong a license to test his invention. Tragically, Armstrong never enjoyed much financial success. His wife eventually left him. He became penniless and ultimately committed suicide. This is very sad. This was also something that was going on later on. If we talk about the Apple versus IBM compatibles or PCs, you have, um, um, okay, his name all of a sudden, Bill Gates with his PCs, and you have Steve Jobs with Apple. Um, Apple wanted to be the one that everybody used. Okay, Apple was much better than PC. It still is better than PC in many regards, but the PC, the Microsoft empire, was in it to crush Apple. They had 95% of their software was on 95% of computers, whereas Apple was on 5%. But we don't have to cry a tear for Apple now, do we? They have run their company so well that they probably have more cash reserves than any other company in America. It's quite amazing. So, business is vicious. And the people who want to win at all costs in business will destroy other people if they have to. So, as station manager for the Marconi wireless station atop the Wanamaker department store in New York, Sarnoff and two assistants collected signals from the Olympic, a ship, confirming the sinking of the Titanic, and intercepted messages from the Carpathia to the Marconi station at Cape Race with the names of survivors. After a rub-down at a Turkish steam bath, he continued to collect and report names and relay them to the press from the Marconi station at Seagate in Brooklyn. Kind of an arrogant thing to do while people are dying and their names are being identified and collected. He decided to go to the sauna for a Turkish steam bath, knowing that he could beat every other person with the news. Arrogant is not the word for it. I'll have to find another word, but it was the height of arrogance to do such a thing. David Sarnoff claimed to have invented the TV. He claimed to have invented almost anything, but Philo Farnsworth is the one who invented TV. Please don't forget that. We'll talk about him later. Philo Farnsworth. That name doesn't just dribble off your tongue. It is something that people have to search for. In broadcasting, you don't have to remember this man's name, Harold Arlen, but he was the world's first full-time radio announcer. He also was the first to announce a Major League Baseball game and a college football game on the radio. He worked at KDKA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Interesting that other people who were the voices of radio became extremely famous. Johnny Carson had his partner, Ed, can't think of Ed's last name. Anyway, these people who ended up in TV had come from radio. They had good voices. They had resonant voices. People liked their voices, felt comfortable with their voices, could recognize their voices when they heard them anywhere. And they became very wealthy just using their voices. And today, people who have been actors find it sometimes easier to give up acting and go into voiceovers, where they are the voices on commercials. Sometimes you'll hear a commercial and you'll think, that voice is so familiar. And before you know it, you're driving down the road and it comes to you. And it's somebody like Marlon Brando, or somebody like, let's think of somebody more recent, Julie Kavner, who was on television as a young woman, left television, and she became Marge Simpson's voice and has done that for years, and she makes a lot of money at it. So if you're afraid of acting, but you would like to act with your voice, think about going into radio or commercials. All right, one more slide here. So we're back to the vacuum tube here. By 1915, the vacuum tube was developed, which helped produce a reliable radio transmitter and receiver. Amateur radio operators could now make nightly broadcasts of news, a so-called wireless newspaper. You could buy the parts of a radio and put together a radio set in your basement or in your bedroom, wherever you wanted, in your home, and you could broadcast all around the world through that. Lee DeForest had invented the Audion vacuum tube almost a decade earlier. People who are hobbyists at radio are called ham operators, H-A-M, ham operators. They do this usually as a hobby. They have become important at points in our history because they had the ability to broadcast certain things that other places could not broadcast. So they became very important to us as a society. When the U.S. entered World War I in 1917, the government shut down all radio stations. Why? Well, during the war, U.S. citizens could not legally own or operate a radio transmitter, like a ham operator, or receiver without special permission. The ban was lifted at the end of the war. The problem was they didn't want any interference on their radio frequencies. So they had to get rid of all these thousands of ham operators. Not get rid of them, but get rid of their ability to transmit on their wavelengths. So they didn't want any interference. That's one of the main reasons when you get on an airplane and the pilot asks you to turn your phone off. It can cause interference with his instruments.